Now,
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 7:06 this Monday morning. Good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. It's O'Connor and Company on this 7th day of October, where we, throughout the morning, are acknowledging the one-year anniversary of the horrific terror attacks in Israel and against Americans as well, and the continued reaction to and result of Israel defending herself and trying to rid herself once and for all of this existential enemy on her borders. We'll discuss it throughout the morning. Also at 7:35, Trevor Matich will talk about the Commanders game yesterday. 8:05, Sean Parnell. He was at the Butler rally there where Trump returned to the scene of the assassination attempt on his life. And then at 8:35, our friend John Kahn, who's got a brand new song out. It's selling blockbusters, and it's a tribute to Donald Trump and his campaign, and for that matter, those Americans who support and vote for him. That's all coming up. Also, this afternoon. Now, that's right. We're doing a little heavy lifting here for Vince Coladays, but here at WMAL, we're very proud that J.D. Vance, running mate for Donald Trump, will be on Vince's show this afternoon at 5:05. There, Julie Gunlock, jump in here. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Good morning.
Joining us right now is Joe diGenova, legal analyst, former U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia. Joe, good morning. Good to talk with you. And you're hunkering down, I suspect. You've got a hurricane coming your way that's going to sweep straight across Florida and aim for you in St. Augustine.
That is correct. We are getting our hurricane preparations completed, bringing things indoor, taking down umbrellas, doing all the stuff you usually do.
Well, and in that vein, I want to get to the opening of the Supreme Court term that is beginning right now. But with regard to what we're seeing on the ground right now with FEMA and the emergency lack of emergency presence there and relief now, over a week into this disaster area in western North Carolina, you're seeing the federal government trying to keep private citizens from actually helping each other, helping their brothers and sisters and neighbors. They're trying to block aid organizations from coming into that zone. It's report after report after report. What is their legal basis there? Is the government allowed to keep people from helping each other?
Well, the government has control of the skies, and it has control sometimes in these situations of communications technology, and it can do a lot of things to prevent as well as help. What puzzles me is I'm not quite sure why they're not engaging with outside groups in a common effort to try and solve problems. One gets the impression that they're obstructing it. Maybe that's wrong, but I don't think it is. Remember, this is a very strange administration. Everything happens for a reason. They came in order to destroy the Trump model of government that works for the people. They decided they were going to destroy that, and they have massively succeeded, especially in foreign policy, where they have put the United States at great risk. Now they're doing it at home. I have yet to hear a good explanation for why they can't do what administrations have done for ages, and that is reprogram money. They say they're out of money. They have no problem reprogramming money for hundreds of other uses, but for some reason, they can't seem to ask Congress's permission, which is done by committees, by the way, not by vote of Congress. They just ask the Appropriations Committee to reprogram money. They're not asking for that.
Well, and they do that all the time for whatever reason.
Yes, of course. Of course they do. That's exactly right. So the answer is, why are they not? The question is, rather, why aren't they doing it? There's only one answer for me. They don't want to.
Well, and that brings us to this headline, Joe diGenova from Politico. I'm going to read it to you. Helene hit Trump strongholds in Georgia and North Carolina. It could swing the election. Subheadline, officials in both swing states face urgent decisions about helping people vote in shattered communities. The fact of the matter is, the longer it takes for these communities to get back on their feet and get back to normal, the longer it takes for them to be able to vote and get their ballots in and get back to and that could literally swing the election. Do I need to adjust my tinfoil hat to see clearly what's happening?
No, and in fact, the conduct of this administration, the Biden-Harris administration, invites that type of analysis because they've spent the last 3 years trying to demonize Donald Trump and his supporters The key phrase in that sentence is "and his supporters."
Mm-hmm.
They demonized everyone who supports Donald Trump. So for them, for the Biden-Harris people, keeping those people from the polls could certainly be a legitimate objective in their eyes. Remember, they want him destroyed, but they want his movement destroyed. The president, President Biden, constantly talks about MAGA and his hatred for it and the need to destroy it. This would be a wonderful way, in the view of the Biden-Harris people, to hurt Trump, to make it difficult for people in those states to vote for Trump when they are red strongholds for Donald Trump. Unfortunately, the Biden administration doesn't have to worry about the blowback on that because the media doesn't cover that story, doesn't even want to cover the fact that there's been this horrible, horrible natural disaster in these states. So they could use this as a way to suppress the vote, and it appears that they are, and that might very well explain their attitude toward not being against people coming into these areas for relief.
Joe, I want to switch subjects for a moment here, and although it is still about election interference, Jack Smith filed a motion late last week, and it was packed with the evidence that he intends to use to prosecute Donald Trump. Judge Chutkan, no surprise here, unsealed all of that evidence, making it available to the public. Is the Supreme Court at any point going to step in and I don't know what they can do, but can they try to manage Judge Chutkan, who just seems out of control and determined to affect the election?
Well, they tried to manage her and the D.C. Circuit, the federal judges above her in the appellate part of the D.C. Circuit, by sending back Trump versus the United States, which was the presidential immunity decision, which was one of the greatest and most historic rebukes of a group of judges ever issued by the United States Supreme Court. And it is pretty obvious that Judge Chutkan, who just is so arrogant and dismissive of the Supreme Court, I cannot imagine the stuff that she has said and written in her most recent order. Her language is just unbelievable for a federal judge. It's snooty. It's dismissive. We're talking about a former president here, and it's really important constitutional issues involving immunity. And she treats it as if it's a traffic ticket, and it's of no moment. And she has this smarmy attitude toward the Supreme Court that I'll do what I have to do. I'm not worried about them. I'm not going to worry about whether or not there's an election going on. Well, she should be worried that there's an election going on. And Jack Smith, of course, is reprehensible. I pray to God that Trump wins just so I can be there for the moment when he fires Jack Smith, which would be one of the great moments in American history. An unprofessional, unethical prosecutor who's been smacked down by the Supreme Court, not only in this case, but in other cases before the Supreme Court, usually with unanimous decisions. Jack Smith has been the most rebuked United States prosecutor, along with Andrew Weissman, in the history of the Justice Department. And yet Weissman and Smith enjoy fine reputations inside the Justice Department. That'll tell you something about the state of the Justice Department.
Joe, real fast, the Supreme Court session begins. Here's the headline from your favorite, Nina Totenberg, there at Morning Edition. The headline is, Guns, Transgender Rights, and Porn. The Supreme Court begins another term. I don't know. Actually, it sounded like the Democrat National Convention. But what's on your radar here this term?
Well, it's a bunch of cases involving transgender surgery, which, of course, is a gigantic issue, one which the Supreme Court has tried to avoid, and they may even try to avoid it. But the problem is you can read the Constitution all day long. You won't find this strange new inalienable right in it, which is the right to mutilate the bodies of children without the consent of their parents.
Right.
It's a strange
and
right.
that is the crux of it, isn't it? It's a state power to regulate medical care for minors with or without the rights of the parents to make those medical decisions for their kids.
That is exactly right.
And it transcends the transgender issue.
Of course it does. And it gets into the whole issue of what are the rights of parents. The left has managed to get most of the media and many in the court system and in legislatures around the country to believe that parents are really not an important part of a family. I'm not quite sure how this idea has gained currency, but can you imagine just saying those words a few years ago? I mean, obviously, the governor of Virginia found out that when you say that parents are not important and that the government owns your children, he lost an election.
Yeah.
Terry McAuliffe found out the hard way. But since then, there seems to have been a downhill race towards stupidity and ignoring natural law. And, this just the plight of the American family has been made worse by public discourse over the last several years. And hopefully the Supreme Court will issue a ruling. It's tried to stay away from this, by the way. They're very frightened of this issue. The court is worried about all sorts of blowback, as you might imagine they might be from the way they're being treated by the mainstream media. But they have to start laying down some lines in this area, both here and in Title IX and women in sports. I mean, these are the issues of our time. These are the sleeper issues of our time, which I think affect a lot of people, and they're not showing up on the radar in terms of polling and who people are going to vote for.
Yeah, you're right. They don't show up in the polls, but it is something that we talk about, and I think that it's one of those hidden issues that's going to make they're going to find out the day after the election, I think. Joe, we got to leave it there. Joe diGenova, always good to talk to you, sir.
Thank you. A very big thank you to Pennsylvania. We love Pennsylvania. And as I was saying...
That's Donald Trump in Butler, who began his speech at the very spot where he was shot at with the assassin's bullet going right past his ear, just a fraction of a centimeter from fracturing his skull. He turned to the screen. They put up the same chart about illegal immigration, and he said, as I was saying.
Brilliant.
It's
Brilliant.
a great, great moment. He also timed the speech. So at that moment, at 6:11, they would have a moment of silence for a Corey Comparator who lost his life that day.
Thank you. A very big thank you to Pennsylvania.
Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. This one.
Time. It is 6:11, 12 weeks to the minute that the shooting began. I would like to ask everyone to join me in a moment of silence.
And the silence went on for a bit, and then there was a bit of a memorial presentation there. It was a very moving moment. Also of note at this rally was the presence of Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla, SpaceX, X, the Boring Company, many ventures. Obviously, literally the richest man in the world. And it was on this day 12 weeks ago in Butler when, after the assassination attempt, Elon Musk publicly said, that's it, I'm all in for Trump.
Yeah.
Trump introduced him. He came up on stage kind of reluctantly, but then he suddenly started leaping for joy on the stage like a kid when faced with that kind of ovation from a huge, huge crowd. Yep. And he spoke.
Well, I want to say what an honor it is to be here. And, the true test of someone's character is how they behave under fire.
Right?
And we had one president who couldn't climb a flight of stairs, and another who was fist pumping after getting shot. Fight, fight, fight! Blood coming down the face. Now, America is the home of the brave. And there's no truer test than courage under fire. So who do you want representing America? Yeah.
I want to play a little more of Elon Musk. It is funny, whatever I hear I hear the cadences and tone of all the nerd friends that my kids had in high school. He is, at his heart, just a tech nerd.
The left hates this.
Oh, yes.
So much. And we've started to see some ramping up of the attacks on Elon Musk. I'm not surprised at all. Not that
This is a courageous thing for him to do.
It really is.
Because, honestly, he doesn't need to do this. He's literally the richest man in the world. He can stop doing everything. But he's got many ventures with the government from space.
Many of his contracts.
And he must feel pretty confident that NASA and the military are so reliant on him now.
Well, he keeps saving astronauts and
Yes.
people. And
This election, I think it's the most important election of our lifetime. This is no ordinary election. The other side wants to take away your freedom of speech. They want to take away your right to bear arms. They want to take away your right to vote effectively.
Yeah, and he's been talking about that quite a bit, about the illegal immigration and how that's affecting voter turnout and the citizenship here and the makeup of the country. So that was Musk. Coming up, by the way, we've got to discuss the rally is Sean Parnell at 8:05. He was there. He'll give us a firsthand account of it. But I do want to tell you this. John Cahn's song, it's called Fighter, about Donald Trump. I'm sure you've seen the video by now. It's quite beautiful. Played that at the rally beforehand. John Cahn also wrote American Heart, which was a song that was used often in rallies, at Tea Party rallies in particular. John's an old friend. He was an old dear friend of Andrew Breitbart's. John used to work in the entertainment business. And he was around all the time in the offices at Breitbart headquarters, just sort of, he didn't work for the company at the time, he does now. But he was just sort of, one of Andrew's pals and drinking buddies and stuff. So John's going to join us, talk about this song and his sort of coming out as a conservative in the entertainment business. That's at 8:30.
Now,
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
7:36, it's O'Connor and Company. Thanks for tuning in here on this busy Monday morning. Coming up at 8:05, Sean Parnell was at that Trump rally in Butler. He'll give us his firsthand account of what he saw. He was there, by the way, 12 weeks ago during the assassination attempt, too. Really emotional and cathartic sort of closure there, for lack of a better word. Then at 8:35, as we just mentioned, John Cahn. Also, coming up later today at 5 o'clock hour, the Vince Colonnese Show. He's going to have a special guest. It's going to be Julie Gunlock's neighbor, Senator J.D. Vance. He's your neighbor. He's a few blocks away from you. Is Senator Vance, and he, of course, is Donald Trump's running mate. He'll give a special appearance on the Vince Colonnese Show. I mean, he's your neighbor. You'd think that you could have got him on.
I'm not going to give any details, but I will say I had a couple texts this weekend of people seeing him and his family out.
There were some
in
sightings.
The community. Yes. Uh-huh. And they said, my goodness, they could not be more normal. They were sort of wrangling kids, and he was dressed casually, and the wife.
That is why he must be destroyed.
Right. And they just said it could have been any of us. It could have been, just another family, and they're so nice and normal. So.
All right. So make sure you tune in for that, J.D. Vance, and I'm sure he'll talk about how Julie's husband doesn't get the garbage out in time. Yeah, that's coming up. But first, let's get to it. Boy, it's very exciting to have these conversations now on Monday. Trevor Matich, we've been doing this for 12 years together, you and I, entering our 13th year, these conversations about yesterday's NFL game. And how often do we have to say, oh, that was so depressing, that was so hard to watch, these guys, they're so frustrating. But boy, oh boy, I mean, was there any downside to yesterday's game? Because finally now we've got a defense, too. They just handled the Cleveland Browns.
The Cleveland Browns offense was absolutely well and truly stuffed by the Washington defense, and that was so fun to watch. You're right. This was a complete team victory, incredibly satisfying for the home crowd, who isn't used to, for the last couple of decades, having so much to cheer about. And I'll tell you what, the defense was great. The offense did a great job, but the young quarterback, I think, had his best game, even though statistically it didn't stand out.
Oh, why is that?
Because he came into this game averaging about 80% completion, right? And so he would throw a lot of short passes, and then he would also throw a few over the top, and he was good at both. But most of his passes were relatively short. So what happens is when a young quarterback comes into the league, defenses aren't quite sure how to defend him. Then they get a couple of games of watching him, and they know exactly what he does well and what to take away from him and make him do something else. And so that's when the young quarterbacks tend to fall off and they tend to struggle, because now they have to adjust to complexities of NFL defenses that they didn't have to face in college so much.
Gotcha.
Well, with all those short passes, the Cleveland defense came up and said, okay, we're not going to let you have those. We're going to take those away. We're going to make you throw deep, and you'll hit a few of those, but we can live with that. But we're also going to make you throw those intermediate passes, which are more complex because there's more defenders that you have to negotiate, throw it over this guy, but get it there before the safety gets there, all these things. So they made Jaden Daniels adjust, and he did adjust. He threw a bad interception early in the game at the goal line, but then after that, he was able to adjust and make those intermediate throws, make those deep throws, even though they were taking away the bread and butter short throws. And I thought that adjustment by Jaden Daniels to be able to excel anyway when the defense knew what he was doing and tried to take it away, I thought that was brilliant, even though he was only 14 for 25, which is far from 80%.
Well, and the atmosphere at the stadium, I did go to the game yesterday. The atmosphere was absolutely electric. Every time he starts to play Jaden Daniels, obviously there's excitement, but there's not the sense of, what could go wrong here, which is often the case in the past with Redskins quarterbacks. And when he runs, it seems like it's very deliberate. It's like almost every time he runs, and he ran effectively at a lot of yards, but he's almost always running on a design play where he's running on a diagonal toward the sidelines, Trevor. So you're not, you don't have your heart in your throat knowing that one hit is going to ruin his career, thus ruining the Commanders' chances for the rest of the foreseeable future.
Yeah, that's exactly right. 'Cause it does put your heart in your throat when your quarterback runs, because he's probably going to get hit, but they put blockers in front of him when he runs those wide runs. And a lot of the time, he doesn't get tackled out there. Yeah. He just runs, gets as many yards as he can, then steps out of bounds because he's already on the sidelines. And then when he is in the pocket and he's pressured and he has to climb up in the pocket and take off running straight ahead where the traffic is, he's so decisive when he decides to take off. And when he bursts to full speed, that defenders don't have much of a chance to grab him before he clears that line of pass rushers. And then he gets into the open field, he runs to the sideline, and then he just steps out of bounds instead of taking a really big hit. And so he's going to take hits. He has taken hits, but not nearly as many as you would think based on as many times as he runs on the stat line.
Trevor, Julie has a quick NFL question here for you. Yeah.
Trevor, this is very important. Are you ready? Do you have any thoughts on why Taylor Swift isn't showing up to as many Chiefs games?
Don't
let me down, Trevor.
My initial thought is that she's employed. She's self-employed. She has a job, and she has to work, and sometimes that work takes her to the other side of the planet. So.
This is not satisfying. You could not work for People magazine.
Yeah, I think there's trouble in paradise, personally.
Thank you, Larry.
But the thing is, though, I mean, everybody wants this to be a big conspiracy that she's breaking up with Travis Kelce, the Chiefs tight end, and maybe that's what's going on.
Yeah.
There you go. You turned it around, Trevor. You turned it around. You did good. Thank you, Trevor.
But let me just say one thing, that it's so good for her from a visibility standpoint that she needs it, but it's been good for her brand. I think that she would keep showing up if she could get there.
I think he's really getting into this subject.
Trevor Matich, by the way, is also the top college analyst on ESPN over the weekend. I do need to ask, because there's a lot of Army-Navy fans in this area, and like rooting for the Redskins or Commanders, it's very rare for us at this point after Week 6. Both Army and Navy are 5-0 right now and looking absolutely dominant in the American Conference. How is it possible that neither of them are in the AP Top 25 or the Coaches Poll Top 25 at this point? They're playing amazing football.
They are, and I think part of it's schedule. For example, you look at Army, and the best team they probably face this year is Rice.
Yeah, and so you're right about Army, but Navy beat Memphis. Come on, and Air Force.
Right, and I think Navy should be ranked. And the truth of it is, they're both playing exceptionally well. I wouldn't be surprised if they played in the conference championship game of the American Conference, the AAC, and then the next week played each other again in the Army-Navy game.
That would be amazing.
Now, wouldn't that be something?
It would be something.
But they are both incredible.
I'll tell you something. Having been around the Navy program, and a lot of those players, it would be cool to play Army for the American Athletic Conference Championship, but it still will not be anything like the Army. The Army-Navy game will still be the biggest game of the year, even though it'll still be Army-Navy. Right. There's something about that Army-Navy, which will be, by the way, at Northwest Stadium this year here in D.C. for the Commander-in-Chief's Trophy. All right, we got to leave it there. Go ahead, Trevor.
Let me say this real quick. Both quarterbacks are incredible. Blake Horvath for Navy.
Yeah.
If he had enough pass attempts, he would be leading the nation in yards per pass attempt, passer rating, things like that. I mean, he deserves to be in the conversation for the Heisman Trophy.
Yeah.
Because he's not only a great runner, he's also a dangerous deep thrower. And Bryson Daly of Army also is throwing the ball really well, which is super strange for these two teams.
By the way, it should also be noted, Trevor Matich's alma mater, BYU, also undefeated right now in Week 6, one of the 12 remaining undefeated teams. So it's kind of fun to be a football fan right now around here.
Rise and shout.
Thanks, Trevor. It's 7:45 WMAL traffic and.
Finally, the truth behind the headlines. It's the Vince Colonnese Show, weekdays 3 to 6 on WMAL.
Of course, Saturday Night Live during a political season is always hot and heavy, and they usually focus on the presidential race, which they did this weekend. But also, one of our local friends of the program actually made some news. You'll remember in the debate last week, Hung Kao made this case about the military.
When you're using a drag queen to recruit for the Navy, that's not the people we want. What we need is alpha males and alpha females who are going to rip out their own guts, eat them, and ask for seconds.
That's right. And that was a bit of a viral moment. Hung Kao really, his profile is super huge and already got bigger after that debate and those clips. So Saturday Night Live at Weekend Update tried to make a joke about this. Remember, by the way, Hung Kao is a retired captain from the Navy. He was detailed with explosive ordnance disposal, which means they diffused bombs underwater sometimes and things like that.
Superhero
He
stuff.
was tied with special ops teams a lot. So here's the joke.
Hung Kao, a Republican candidate for Senate in Virginia, criticized drag queens and implied that they are not tough enough to serve in the military, which is sad because Hung Kao is a fantastic drag name.
Well, it's a Hung Kao, it's a good drag name, which it's a funny joke, I guess. I mean, I don't mind that. And Hung makes fun of his own name, by the way.
Yeah,
of course.
Well, and getting on SNL.
That's a
Not
big
bad.
profile thing. And of course, they couldn't make a joke about what he was really
The
talking
content
about
of- yes,
because
exactly.
it's irrefutable.
Yeah.
Also, the opener once again put Kamala Harris in the intelligent, smart person in the room sort of role, which is it may look like they're making fun of the Democrats, which they sort of are, but they do it in a way that always elevates Kamala Harris. Notice what they're doing here. And here's Kamala and Doug watching Tim Walz's debate performance.
Okay, he's out there. He's doing his thing, whatever that may be.
Okay, come on, just relax. You know, you haven't had a night off in 3 months. Do you want to watch something less stressful like the Menendez Brothers show?
I don't know, Dougie. I kind of wish I had picked Josh right now.
Oh, Josh Shapiro?
No, Josh. Cabernet.
Different bottle of wine.
It'll be fine. It's not like he's going to say something crazy.
I've become friends with school shooters.
They cut back
And
to
she-
Kamala, and she broke her wine glass in her hand.
They could have made a joke about her husband beating his ex-girlfriend.
Yeah, there's not a lot of humor
Well,
there.
they could have mentioned it.
But no, well, you know what? You know who else could have mentioned it? ABC News and NBC News and CBS
yes.
News about his alleged
Yeah.
beating up of his girlfriend.
Yeah,
allegedly.
maybe Kristen Walker over the weekend
No,
could have.
they
No,
won't touch that. 7:54.